Alright, welcome back to Lost Kingdoms. We're in the Apothecary with Gerd here, who's going to give us a lot of backstory on what's going on. Basically, the fog is everywhere, we gotta go fight it, our king is fighting it, who's also our dad, and we've got the rune stone, and he's defenseless without the rune stone, so the story pretty much doesn't matter for this game. Anyway, the important part is, this is the shop for this game. You have two different kinds of currency, if you will. First one's obviously just plain old gold. You use gold to buy cards. You get gold by selling cards. That's pretty much the only way you ever get gold. You start with 50 in case you really want to buy something, but just about anything you actually want to buy, you're going to have to sell something for. The other type of currency you're going to have is the experience of the cards themselves. As cards fight and as you gather magic stones, the cards are going to get experience over time. So long as they're in your deck, they'll get the experience from the magic stones. So long as they are the one that strikes the killing blow, they'll get the experience from that. The first option for experience for cards is transforming, and you've got a couple examples of things that cards can transform into here. Depending on the amount of XP, they're going to transform into different things. Usually the most expensive transformations are the best ones, and transforming can also get you cards that you wouldn't encounter until way later in the game, so it can be pretty helpful. But for now, we're not actually going to be transforming anything. The crow is close to being able, or raven is close to being able to transform into something useful, and the venom lizard is only going to need 2000 EXP before we can transform it, but we can't do too much of it for now. What we can do is copy cards. Copying cards is getting yourself a new copy of a card that you have already, which costs a set amount of experience based on how powerful the card is. This is the animation for it. I'm probably not going to show it from here on out, but it's good to see it at least once. She does a magic thing, then the card turns into two monsters. And now we have a second Dragon Knight, and Dragon Knights are fairly good in the early game and throughout the entirety of the game, so it works. But we're not really going to transform too much else. Actually, that's a lie. We're going to copy some fairies here in a minute just to get ourselves some venture capital. And time to talk a little bit about deck building. Just while I'm messing around within the shop. When you're building a deck, when you're trying to come up with what you want to build, you are capable of seeing what elements are going to be in the next stage, but generally building a 2-element deck or a 3-element deck and swapping out one of the elements if you absolutely need to for a stage is going to be your best move. In this case, I'm getting the fairies copied because they're worth a lot, and because I didn't get any in the first stage. I got 3 extra birdmen, which was unfortunate. So, in regards to building a 2-element deck, one of the cards that's going to be able to carry us a lot through the game is the Lizard Man. The Lizard Man card is a 3-hit card that will allow us to have a very quick, very effective weapon with a fairly wide swing. So putting as many of them in our deck as possible is actually going to help us quite a bit. We aren't going to have too many other weapon cards for now, so Mandragores are going to have to take their place as a grass type card, or a leaf, plant, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, we're also going to put in our other Dragon Knight and our Venom Lizard. We want to have a bunch of different cards in our deck. Generally, you do want to stick at least one copy of any given card in your deck, simply so you can have a copy of that card at the ready for whenever you need it. With that said, this is probably going to be the basic sort of configuration for our deck for quite a while, so let's go ahead and head into Blessoon, where there are 3 different elements, and where we have to just get out. So immediately upon entering the stage, you'll notice that the town is wrecked to shit. It is just completely gone, no building is over head height, and the walls are kinda busted. But what we do have are 4 capstans sitting around the area, and this is a bit of a weird mechanic. If you think about it, the actual purpose of the capstans in the terms of why does this actually exist, I suppose it could be a locking mechanism to try to keep monsters in the Black Fog out, but the Black Fog is listed as a fairly recent issue, so unless they just built it recently, there's really not going to be too much here. These are plague rats. Plague rats are going to appear a lot throughout Blessoon. They're fairly weak, only 16 HP, but they can poison you. I actually wanted to get into a fight here to break those barrels, but it ended up that the plague rat did it for me, so things worked out pretty well there. So anyway, yeah, the capstans, there are going to be four of them in this stage that you have to activate to open up a gate. And if it is truly meant to be a security measure, try to make sure that nobody gets out to the area that it's guarding, why would you make them giant conspicuous colored flames? It just... something about this game in which you summon monsters from cards doesn't make logical sense. I don't understand it. So we have the water fountain control valve, which is still standing despite the destruction of the town. I figure we're as authorized as anybody else, since we are the, you know, the princess of the land. Technically this is ours, unless we're working on sort of a fiefdom sort of thing. But yeah, so if you turn it to the left once and 3 times to the right, that's a code you learn elsewhere in this level, you hear some water running. Right off in the distance, and something that you can sort of see there. Oh, and it's disappeared. That was a blue fairy. From here on out, blue fairies are going to appear in the levels. They run away from you, but if you catch them, they can give you some benefits back. In the case of this one, it's going to give me health. They can also restore your mana, restore a card that you used, or they can actually turn out to be a monster encounter disguised as a helpful unit. So as you can see there, the plague rats do have fairly large range, but their HP is so low that you really don't need to worry about them too much. Of course, the problem is that, you know, he's just not going to cooperate. One of the problems with mandragores is cards that you're going to be using in combat is that it's very easy for enemies to just walk away from them. You have to kind of rely on enemies being slow or moving into the mandragora to be able to use them properly. So when we head to the center of town here, we have another guard here, who's saying, you know, the gate can probably open somehow. Maybe it's related to the giant capstans around town that shoot fire out of the top of them. And we get a free Maelstrom card. It's a trap card that we wouldn't encounter for a little while, but since we solved the tricky puzzle and managed to drain the fountain, free Maelstrom card for us. There's also one other free card up here, and it's going to take us a moment to encounter a random battle. And I'm going to take this opportunity to rag on something that I don't really like about Lost Kingdoms. You can't use cards outside of set combat. I know that doesn't sound really bad, but in a game where a lot of the things that you have to do can be done out of combat if you really needed them to, like destroying objects and things like that, it really isn't great that you have to wait for a random encounter to appear before you can break things, or before you can move onwards, or before you can heal, or use your card restoration abilities, or anything like that. It's just, it's not the greatest system. In any case, we get a free Lycanthrope card back there. Lycanthropes are actually encountered in this level, but they're not very common, and the game kind of wants you to have a couple of powerful summon cards if you can find their hidden cards, so free Lycanthrope for you. For some reason we decided to use the door, even though we could have just stepped over the wall, and of course if there's a well, there's going to be something hidden in it, because this is a video game. In this case it's a Water Hopper card. Water Hoppers we actually aren't going to find for a fair while, so that's not bad. Here we find yet another guard who we're not going to talk to. He doesn't have anything interesting to say, and a treasure chest just over in the corner of the room with a plague rat inside. One of the things that I do like about Lost Kingdoms is the fact that it's going to give you a lot of the cards that you need gradually, or in chests, or by transforming, copying, what have you. It can be useful, but, you know, you can capture cards if you need them, I guess is the point. You don't always need to capture cards. There are a couple that you need to find out in the wild, but they're not very common. Like the Venom Lizard from the first episode is a monster that you won't ever find in a chest, or won't ever be sold. It can be transformed from things like the Lizard Man, but it's just a matter of, well, preference. So anyway, plague rats, for some reason, like to give a lot of magic crystals at times, but that just happens with enemies in general. Also, there's a pot over to the left here. There's a free ghoul card in it, which I think is our very first weapon-type card of the grass element. No, wait, that's a lie. We have the Venom Lizard. Okay, our first non-reptile attacking card? That doesn't even make any sense. get a couple extra chests here with a couple extra cards, and you're able to head through to the next area because, for some reason, lighting those fires open the gate. Technically, they are capstans, so I guess they might have been operating underground mechanisms. But again, that suggests that this was set up before the Black Fog, which means they really thought they'd have to have a door that locks this securely for some reason. Oh, so here we find the Mystery Man, who's about to introduce himself as Alexander. Alexander studies fairies, both red and blue, and he's actually just kind of a supporting character for this game. He collects the red fairies that you find. There are 100 within the game, and he's saying that when you find them, they'll like you, they'll take a liking to you, and they'll just kind of follow you around. When they follow you around, bring them to my home. I will take them from you, and I will study them, as science does. Of course, the issue with this is that Lost Kingdoms... Wait, have I even brought this up yet? I don't think I have, so this is a great time to do so, because of red fairies. Red fairies, there are 100 of them in the game, and collecting them can be one of the more frustrating side quests for a couple of reasons. The first reason, primarily, is that you cannot replay stages in Lost Kingdoms, and it's a terrible, terrible design choice. You could replay them once you've actually beaten the final boss, but by the time you've beaten the final boss, you really just don't want to keep playing, unless for some reason you're farming up cards for the multiplayer mode or something. By the way, there's a multiplayer mode in this game, just in case you wanted to card battle in real time. I think it actually looks pretty badass, and I like the multiplayer mode. The only problem is, this game wasn't well developed enough for a multiplayer mode to really be a feasible thing to do. Also, there are certain broken strategies, and there are one-hit kill cards. Well, there's a one-hit kill card. And just the whole thing wasn't completely thought out. They just kind of said, here are some cards in an arena, have at it. So, we could finish up the stage here by going across that bridge that's just in front of us, but obviously we're not going to do that. First, we're going to open up the chest to get a brand new card, and a brand new type of card, I suppose you'd say. The Sea Monk that we just collected is a healing card, but unlike the Fairy, which heals our HP, the Sea Monk will restore 1 to 5 cards to our deck. This is fairly useful if you ever start running out of cards, but it also runs the disadvantage of the fact that the Sea Monk costs 8 mana. So if you cast it, you're not going to have much for anything besides your average weapon card. So very first thing we're going to do, we're going to head over here and break these barrels because that actually opens the way to the next part of the level. If you don't break those barrels when this enemy encounter occurs, you're actually going to be stuck here until you just wander around enough to find another fight. So this red fairy is explaining, yeah, there are blue fairies, they're cool guys except for the ones that are actually monsters disguised as blue fairies, and I've gotta say, that's a hell of a disguise. Look at this guy, he's going to wander up, encounter us, and it turns out that was actually 2 plague rats and a lycanthrope hiding inside of that small fairy. Or no, sorry, a lizard man, a plague rat, and a lycanthrope. So, might as well explain the fighting style of lycanthropes and lizard men while we're here. Lycanthropes, for some reason, love to backflip around their field, whereas lizard men are just going to come at you and swing their sword very slowly. Lizard men are actually pitifully weak to themselves, which is pretty funny. Lycanthropes, meanwhile, are vulnerable to counterattacking when they try to swing at you. They'll always be stationary for just a moment before they try to hit you, so if you hit them in that moment before their attack strikes, you'll be able to kind of cancel out their movement, make sure that you can actually hit them. So this secondary of Blessoon is completely optional. You never have to go here, but if you don't, you won't collect a couple of red fairies, and you'll miss a card that you might not get for another couple of stages at worst. But of course, we're going for all the red fairies since I want to try to complete my card collection by the end of this LP. Oh, that's fairly important to note. That little diamond symbol that appeared above our head, that was the fairy restoring our mana. So whenever you see that, it means that it's restored some of your mana, you got a little bit charge back. Alright, so here's a red fairy. Oh no, the humans are gone. I don't understand the concept of genocide, so you know, I'm just gonna go ahead and chill with you for a while. And I guess that is sort of an interesting thing about the red fairies, is that they're portrayed as naive and yet incredibly wise to game mechanics, which doesn't really work together. It's like 1 second they're going to be like, oh, I love adventure, take me with you, and the next they're like, if you wish to not be hit by an enemy, if you think an attack is unavoidable, strike with one of your cards just as the enemy attack is about to hit you, and your invincibility frames might allow you to not take damage. I'm just like, that's great, Fairy, but how do you know that? So the last thing that I wanted to demonstrate with the blue fairies, which I actually did just get to, we got the 4 different types in a row, which is pretty cool. The blue fairy can restore a card. In the case of the blue fairy we just received, it restored our mummy card. The reason I know this is because the card actually appears above your head. And if you can see the card fast enough, you'll actually be able to determine what has been restored for you. So there are times when you'll like grab one of those and you'll see, oh, my lizard man has been restored. But there'll be other times when you grab it and you're like, oh, my dragon knight has been restored. So it's a bit of a crapshoot because it's completely random which card they're going to give you back. But anyway, once you fight your way back through Blessoon, if you want to abort after getting the red fairies, it does allow you to fight back through the stage. And the red fairies will stay collected, you don't have to grab them again. So here we have the boss of this stage, the lava golem. He has 2 attacks. The first one, as you see there, he'll strike the ground and it'll cause magma to shoot up and then lift up into the sky. Mandragoras, despite being not very effective against him, are actually going to be sort of strong due to the fact that his stagger time is very low. There's his second attack. He will fire off his little shoulder spikes for a ranged attack. If you stay just out of range of his melee and just under the range of his hit, you'll be able to do fairly well for yourself, but I'm going to talk quickly here because there's going to be something I need to explain. This is card cycling. If you strike with different cards, you're actually able to attack faster than you would otherwise. So those lizard men, I was going A, B, Y, X in order, and once I'd cycled through the lizard men, it actually allowed me to strike just as soon as the previous attack had stopped, rather than waiting a small cooldown time before the card could be used again. This allows you to strike with cards very quickly, and is actually one of the reasons that stacking lizardmen is a viable option, and not only a viable option, but the speedrun tactic for this game. So, now that I've sort of gotten that out of the way, I won't really explain card cycling too much because it doesn't come up very often, but if it ever looks like I'm going to use a card more quickly than I should be able to, chances are I'm hitting with one and then striking with the other immediately afterwards. So now that we've met Alexander, his house appears on the map. If we go here, we can see he has little fairy plushies around the room, as well as an inordinate amount of books. So, we can give him fairies, and once we give him fairies, he gives us things back. The very first fairy that we encountered in his cutscene will always get you a fire golem card, or fire gargoyle, sorry, fire golem was the boss. The fire gargoyle is a monster that can be captured naturally, you actually encounter them in Blessoon, but they're very rare, and you always get their card from Alexander, which is why I didn't spend the time to grind up finding one. And then we do have another stage in the form of the burial grounds, but first we want to go to the apothecary again real quick, because there's some stuff we need to do with our cards. First and foremost, we want to talk to Gerd to see about a side quest. Oh, I guess not, I'm going to sell some cards. While I'm selling cards, going to explain. Side quests in this game are a bit funny, in that you don't actually encounter side quests by finding them organically. You encounter just about every single side quest in this game by talking to Gerd, who tells you there are people within your kingdom that need helping. Go assist them. Oh, we are going to transform a card here. We're going to transform the Dark Raven into the Cockatrice. The Cockatrice card is of course very useful, as it is a giant bird griffin thing that can turn enemies to stone with its stone breath. I don't know how to describe it. Point is, it costs 3,000 experience, but it's a great use for our Dark Raven card since they're going to fall out of fashion pretty quickly, unlike the Lizard Man, which we'll continue using for a while. So our first side quest is going to be gotten from Gerd right here. She's telling us to go to the Dalnock Valley to fight giant bees that are terrorizing the population, because apparently being an exterminator is now part of the royalty's duties. That said, I can sort of understand it. If they're black fog monsters, nobody else can fight them, and as the hero of the land, we gotta be expected to take care of our people at some point. So, say goodbye to the burial grounds, because we're not going to be heading over there for a while, even though it's the next stage. Instead, we're going to be going to the Dalnock Valley, and then immediately after that to the second side quest, which unlocks right after. All you need to do is talk to Gerd again. That's literally the only option that you have to get to the side quest, but you know what? That's fine. Anyway, until next time, this has been PA, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.